31 says, "Therefore, whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do all to the glory of God."
Yes.
And so, my first point, the highest level of manhood, if you ask people in general, if you were to ask people, what do you think manhood is? And obviously, if you went out in the streets and asked that, you would get every type of answer. You would get men that would think that manhood is, the muscles, being tough or not backing down from a fight, or maybe you get a little bit more, quote unquote righteous answers like, a man is someone that takes care of their family, which would be a very good answer, right? But what we're after today is trying to define and describe what the highest level of manhood is. And what that is really is being like Christ. For us, that is true manhood. It's being like Christ. That is the highest level. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of factors that have to do with being a man. But the highest level of that, the highest representation of a true man, and in the context of what we're after, is being like Christ. Christ was our maximum example of being a man. So Jesus always was challenging people to that level, to be like him. And so one of the examples that I thought about was in Matthew chapter 19, where this rich young ruler comes to Jesus, and he wants eternal life, he wants to be a follower of Christ, he wants to do all these things. And so, Jesus begins to challenge him. You know the commandments, you know what you need to do, and so, he flashes all these things before Christ. Yeah, I've done this, I've done that. Basically, I'm a good person. And then Jesus challenges him, and Jesus said to him, if you want to be perfect, that word perfect doesn't mean absolute perfection. Basically, what it means is full maturity. If you want to be a full, mature man, then go sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. In other words, come be like me. So that is our standard of true manhood, is being like Christ. We need to ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? How would Jesus act? How would Jesus respond to things? What would Jesus be doing if he was here? What would be his heart? What would be his involvement? What would be his passion? What would he be doing? And that needs to be our standard. That's our maximum standard of manhood, is being like Christ. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 13 through 15 says, "Till we all come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man." That word perfect, again, is not absolute perfection, but the full maturity. Until we come to the perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. That we should no longer be children tossed to and fro and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, in the cunning craftiness and deceitfulness of deceitful plotting, but speaking the truth in love, may grow in all things into him who is the head, Christ. So I just have a little note here, and that is that a lot of Christians, the reason they are so unstable, that they are tossed to and fro, the reason they have no real stability in their life, is that they haven't established really this in their life. That they're not trying to be like Christ. They don't have that as a focus. They don't have that as their maximum desire in life. Is, I want to be like Christ. They want to be like other people. They want to be, they want to pursue other things, and so therefore, their lives are always unstable. One particular week they can be inspired and they're on fire for God. Another particular week something happens, and so they're out to the side again. And so if you want to be a stable Christian that's constant, you have to make this a feature, and one of the main things of your life is I want to be like Christ. And so I have another little note here, and that is that this is why our standard of discipline for our children is different from this world. We're not trying to just create good kids. That's not the purpose and the focus of a Christian. We're not just trying to create kids that are just going to go to school and graduate, and all those things are very good. But we're trying to create kids that are going to go to heaven, that are going to turn into men that will serve God and ultimately make heaven their home. And so what I'm trying to distinguish here is, you know, we're not just trying to be good men. The highest level is being like Christ. Being men that will begin to reveal and begin to reflect the nature of who Jesus was. And that's why our discipline is not this discipline of this world, you know. We're not just trying to create kids that are just going to be good kids in life. We want to create kids that are going to love God, that are going to serve God, and at the end of it all is going to make heaven their home. You know, I have a little note here that my parents couldn't understand why I didn't have a television for my son when they came over to the house and they said, well, what about your son? He needs to entertain himself somewhere. Well, but what is he going to do? Well, he's got books to read. No, but he needs to see, she couldn't understand. My mom couldn't understand why we. Well, I'm not trying to just produce a good kid. I'm trying to produce a saved kid.
Yes, amen.
And that's the standard that we're at. We're not trying to just create these good kids. So as men that want to be manly men, as men that want to be the maximum expression of a true man, this needs to be our goal. I want to be like Christ. Okay, so that brings me to the second point, is living up to the standard of the glory of God. So these points that I make here, basically I just go right off of the book. And so he makes some really, really good points about things that will cause a person to not become the manly man in that standard of being like Christ. And so the first of these is the need for approval. So I'll just read one of the excerpts from this book. He says these words: if a man lives for the glory of God, he stops looking for the affirmation from other human beings after every good deed. A pat on the head every time he does his duty. Instead, he throws himself into his role unselfishly. He contents himself with knowing he is fulfilling his purpose in this world and pleasing the God who made him. So, needing men's approval really is a very real factor in people's lives. I've noticed this. If I was to be totally honest, there was times where I struggled with this, where you feel like if you need approval from other people. Galatians chapter 1 verse 10, Paul says these words, do I not now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I still pleased men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. So here Paul puts it in the context of, if you live your life to please men, it's going to be real hard for you to truly be a person that pleases God. It's going to be really hard for you to be a man that is living for the glory of God if all you care about is what men think of you. So, how can you know that someone is living for the approval of men? You know, things like, they'll struggle with making stands. They'll struggle, when the peer pressure is on, they won't be able to make a stand and say no. Their friends are doing other things, and rather than making a stand and say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. And being the quote-unquote bad guy, if you live to please men, you'll follow the crowd. You'll laugh at all their jokes. You'll go with the flow of whatever they're doing. Okay? If you live to please God, then you'll make a stand and you'll say, no, I don't think that's funny. Or no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, so these are signs of someone that is bound by the approval syndrome, discouraged with no recognition. In other words, you do everything to get recognized. Everything you do, someone has to see you doing it. And if someone doesn't see you do it, then simply you don't do it. And so that's a sign that you're doing things for the pleasure of men or to please men and not God. Okay, so Paul said, you can't be an effective servant of Christ if all you care about is what people think about you. Okay, you're doing things, you're playing off of what people feel, and you'll do things, and you're kind of looking around to see what everyone is thinking, and if you get a pat on the back, okay, all right, I'll keep doing this, but if there's no pat, there's no recognition, then you drop it. True servanthood, I think, is when you're willing to serve even when nobody looks, when nobody is watching, when nobody notices, when there's no recognition, there's no applause. That's true servanthood. But someone that is bound by the need for approval can never go into that true servanthood. So these are all signs that someone is bound by that need for approval. George Mueller, this is the old-time preacher, wrote some books about prayer, said these words. George Mueller was asked, what is the secret to your service to God? Mueller's response was this: there was a day when I died, utterly died to George Mueller, his opinions, preferences, taste and will, died to the world, its approval and censure, died to the approval or blame even of my brethren and friends. And since then I have studied to show myself approved only to God. This is a very real issue that we have to deal with in our hearts. The need to feel approved. If that is the driving issue of you serving God, if that is the driving issue of why you do what you do, why you're in ministry, why you do things around the church, if the driving issue is I want to feel approval, then that's not going to last very long. Because there's not always going to be that person that's going to recognize and pat you on the back. So there has to be something deeper. There has to be something within you that says, I do this for the glory of God. I do this because I want to please Jesus. Whether people see or they don't see, whether I get recognized or not, I don't care. I do this for Christ. Okay, that's number one. Number two is not connecting with God for inner resources. If you want to live that level of being a true man in the context of being like Christ, then you have to learn how to connect with God to receive inner resources to help you to serve God. What we do as ministers, and many of you, I know you're here because you want to one day preach the gospel. One of these days you want to be out in the field and you want to raise up a church and you want to establish something and see God do something. So if you want to do that's awesome, but you need to understand that ministry requires a high level of spiritual energy. And so I have a little note here about what Pastor Greg Mitchell preached. I think it was our last conference. And he mentioned about Jesus when he was walking. He was going over to Jerry's daughter to pray for her, and then this girl comes up behind her and touches the hem of his garment. And you know the story. The Bible said that he felt virtue come out of him. And he used that as an example of how ministry will draw virtue from you. And I can tell you, as being a missionary and being a pastor, I can't tell you how many times I've felt spiritually wasted, where I feel emotionally drained, where I feel emotionally like man, you don't want to get up in the morning, you don't want to go to prayer, you don't want to keep ministering to people. You've dealt with all kinds of issues, and sometimes you look at the church and you're like, man, is anybody really saved? And so you feel drained emotionally, spiritually, mentally. You feel like, I don't know if I can keep going. And so what's the answer to that? The answer is quitting? No. The answer is you better have some inner resources that come from a connection with God. You better learn how to connect with God to begin to receive some inner resources. Another excerpt from this book where he makes this point, he says, we can descend into exhaustion and resentment if we do not have the inner resources that come from living in connection with God. And so a scripture that goes with that is John chapter 15, verses 5 and 6. Says, I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit. Without me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered. So I like that word withered, because I think that describes what will happen to your spiritual life if you're not connected to God. And especially as a minister, many of you are going to go out, you're going to pastor, you're going to, and you're going to begin, as God begins to bring in people, guess what comes along with those people? Problems. And you have to deal with issues, you have to do have to prepare for sermons, you have to preach, and it becomes this thing where this cycle where you have to be involved in everything, and if you think you can just keep up with that cycle just on your own human ability, you're not going to last very long. And I believe some of the reasons sometimes people just get so frustrated they want out is because they get in this cycle and they're not in that connection with God where they can get refreshed and restirred by God. Amen. So Jesus said, it's like a vine that's connected, a branch that's connected to the vine. And as long as it's connected, there's going to be vitality. There's going to be refreshing. As long as there's that connection, then God's able to give resources so that vine can continue to move and bear fruit. As long as it's disconnected, then it becomes withered. So a lot of people are withered simply because they're not connected. And this is where your personal relationship God every single morning. This is where you need to learn how to, whether other people are praying or not praying, you need to make a connection to God. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3 is not having insight that comes from beyond us. Okay, you can never be the total man that you need to be by yourself. And I think this is a very important one. You cannot be the total man, at least in the context of being like Christ, and doing that just by yourself. Every one of us needs to learn the arts of gleaning from others, gaining insights from others, learning what others know. And I'll just shoot some scriptures at you, and I'll make some points, and then we'll open it for questions. Philippians chapter 3, verse 17 says, "Brethren, join in following my example, and note those who so walk, as you have us for a pattern." In other words, what Paul is saying is pay attention to what we're doing. Pay attention to how we're living, and you can learn from that. So Paul is telling the Philippians, you can see my life, you can see some of my followers, you could see our lives, and if you pay attention to the pattern, you pay attention to what we're doing, there's things you can glean from that, and you can learn from that, and there are insights that will help you to become the person you need to become. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 5 says, "A wise man will hear and increase learning, and a man of understanding will attain wise counsel." So a wise man is going to be someone that's going to be looking for opportunities to glean, to receive insights from others. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 9 says, "Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning." So someone that truly understands this is someone that's always going to be asking questions. He's going to be inquisitive. He's always going to want to know. So he's always going to be looking for those opportunities. I love it when people or guys they ask questions, and they're always wanting to know, and they're not just asking questions just out of just for the fact of asking questions, but they're wanting to know. They're like a sponge, and they're asking, "Pastor, why this, or why that, or why would you do this? How is this?" And they're always asking questions because they truly want to know. And there's been many times in my time as a pastor, missionary, many times I've been in a simple situation where maybe I'm meeting with someone, or we have them over to the house, and they'll just begin to ask questions, and I'll be able to answer. And in that process of them asking questions, I can transmit so much into their lives. And I've gone away from just a simple fellowship, either me having received some key insights into life, or being able to have transmitted that to somebody else. And if you live your life and you never ask questions, you never want to know, you're not inquisitive, you're not curious, you never want to absorb whatever other people know, then that's going to become an obstacle for you. You can't become the total man that you need to be unto the glory of God by yourself. Just with your own experience, just with your own sphere of knowledge of what you've acquired. You need the knowledge of somebody else. You need the wisdom of somebody else. You need the experiences of somebody else. And if you will absorb those things and have that heart to ask and learn and receive and be humble enough to let someone show you and correct you, and if you will do that, you will glean so much information, so much knowledge, and so much experience that will help you become the man you need to be. Okay, so that's what I have in these notes. So we want to open it up for questions. And so this, as I said, that is expressed in this book, living to the glory of God. A true man is someone that will live to the glory of God. That's going to be their standard. I want to be like Christ. Okay, so does that inspire any questions, any input? Maybe something that, that you can add to this. Maybe when you read the book, this may have inspired something in you that you thought was interesting. Sage.
Yeah, when you were talking about the not connecting the gap for the inner resources, I started thinking about when I was out with my parents when they were pastoring, and as I was thinking about it, I realized, you know what, there was a lot of stuff. When we come back for a conference, and my dad would mention, it's a good time to be refreshed spiritually. And I realize now that he was talking more about himself and my mom, because they were our covering. Me and my siblings, they were our covering. And I was thinking about all the gray hairs that I added to my dad's head because being stubborn and foolish and everything. So I mean, you're the spiritual covering when you're out there, for not just for your church, but also for your family, for your kids, and that all takes a toll on your spirit. It does draw power and virtue, like you were talking about, from you. And so if you don't have a good connection with God, then you'll burn out.
Yeah, one of the horrible things would be if you're out there and your wife is discouraged, your kids are discouraged, and you're discouraged. and they have nowhere to go for refreshing. They have nowhere to go to feel like, hey, everything's going to be okay. Hey, God's going to help us. God's on the throne. God has the victory. And if you don't have that connection, you're going to be on their level of desperation. You're going to be on their level of discouragement. And that's when things begin to go south. So you need that connection. George? Or George?
Yeah, we live in a generation where you're seeing less and less role models, manly role models and examples. Older men, teaching the younger men, how to mature. And so you said something that you struggled with approval or seeing the need for approval. What advice would you give to someone here who's going through that you overcame personally, to somebody that is going through that?
Yeah, you stop caring what people think. I mean, as simple as that sounds, you stop what you do. You stop looking around to see what people are thinking. You do it for God. And if you did something and it didn't turn out right and you get corrected for it, take it and learn from it. You don't live your life. I mean, that was one of the things is that I struggled with for a time. Is every time I would get corrected, I would get discouraged. And I realized that discouraged, that my view of correction was I'm being minimized somehow. My value is being lowered somehow because I'm being corrected. And that was my wrong mentality of approval. Someone that's addicted to approval, all they want is praise. They can't be corrected. And so when I changed that, I realized when someone corrected me, I was able to take it. Okay, I take it. I'll grow from that. I'll take your words and I'll grow from it. But it comes down to you stop caring about what people think and you start caring about just doing things for God. Whether people are looking at you, there's recognition, there's pats on the back, or whether there's nothing like that. You just do things for God. You do things because you love God, and that's just something you have to work out in your heart. You have to, as you begin to live life, as you begin to serve and do things, you hold that in, those reins into position. This is why I'm doing this. I'm doing this for God. And I can't point to a specific day or specific decision. It's just a process that I have to go through. Everyone has to go through. Okay, George.
Pastor, this question is not so much a personal question, but just because the fact that it fits perfectly. My question is that, so when a pastor kind of overtakes a church, or in your case, taking over an assistant pastor position, I'm trying to relate it to, maybe something, of course, that I'm going on to. This book really kind of brought light to my eyes and saying, you know what, it's good to surround yourself by friends and mentors, because they're going to be the ones that kind of help you, good friends and good mentors. And so with that said, my question is that, so, you personally, when you're coming into a role such as this one, or even if you took over a church in another city or another country, obviously there's a lot of different characteristics, different traits and things like that. And the main course is, serving God and doing the right thing. But with that said, in my position, I'm trying my best to fulfill the role of my fathers, which is to keep the steadiness and consistency with the men. But I know that a lot of people see it differently because I'm younger and a lot of people don't know me, or a lot of people, well, in my position, I know sometimes I get frustrated and I just want to get to the point, hey, let's just get this done. But dealing with a lot of men nowadays, they, like you said, they take it personal. They take it like you're mean, you're aggressive, you're strict, you're harsh. And I know that my intentions is not to be like that. But in your opinion and in your advice, what things should I change, or what things should I kind of be different at, to where I can earn not only these men's respect, but where I can earn their trust, because at the same time I'm only trying to help them and help the big cause.
Yeah, I guess the best way I can answer that is when I've taken over churches. One of the things that I've had to learn is that I can't just go in there and just expect them to think like me. I have to go through a process, and so that process has to do with winning them over, winning their confidence, winning their trust. If someone doesn't trust you, then you can say whatever, and they'll say, and then as soon as you turn around, they'll do something else. So one of the keys there is winning their trust. I think that needs to be the focal point. How you do that, and the process, and your personality and all that, all that is kind of off to the side. The real issue is, can you gain their trust? Can you have guys that are going to have confidence in you? And you do that by having integrity. You do that by being honest. You do that by doing what you say you're going to do. Then you can go into all the things that you need to go into. You can correct. You can be hard. You can do all, but because they trust you. And that's what you need to strive for. And as I've taken over churches, I can't say I was always perfect at it, but I did realize that I couldn't move these people until I gained their trust. And so that I realized was a process, and that process is just day by day. They see me praying, they see me doing things, they see me outreaching, they see me doing all these things, and they see me being honest, they see me keeping my word, and through a process of time, it comes to a point when they just learn to trust you, and when it comes to that point, you have their ear, you can influence them, you can help them. But I would say that needs to be the focal point there. So I don't know if that helps. Okay, somebody else. Okay, Brother Rick.
A couple of thoughts, Pastor. Talking about exampleship and following Christ and trying to be like Christ. Paul in 1 Corinthians 11:1 said it very succinctly. He said, follow me as I follow Christ, or imitate me as I imitate Christ. So he made the transition of being as much as Christ as he possibly could. And then secondly, one of the words that kind of struck me when we were going over the study is the word quicken, like in Romans 8:1 says, but is the same spirit that raised Christ from the dead dwell in you, that he raised up from Christ from the dead, he shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his spirit that dwelleth in you. Talking about the refreshing, I was thinking that the word of God is life. It revives, it resuscitates, it makes alive. So, talking about the conference, how it quickens us, to continue pursuing God's will and purpose. And I think that's real critical and important. Sometimes just in service, like you said, coming to service, being faithful to service, the word quickens us, quickens our spirits. That perhaps was, died and then quicken revives us.
And a quick word there is, especially when you're out there pastoring, you need to try to make it to as many conferences as you possibly can, because those conferences, like Brother Rick said, they'll quicken you, they'll help you, they'll refresh you. There's certain, and I've heard of situations where the guys will go out and they'll never go to a conference again. They'll never try to connect to some kind of rally or something. Those things are critical, man, because they'll quicken you, they'll refresh you, so you can go on. So that's a really good point.
Pastor Butch, I just wanted to add to that. Paul says that 1 Corinthians 3:11 says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, and I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put childish things. And what I was thinking about from everything that's been said is this is something that has to be intentional. Us as men, we have to make a conscious decision that, enough already with childish things. It's time to move on into maturity, and that's what draws us men to leadership, is the fact that our pastors' leadership have that maturity, that experience, that time in the kingdom of God, that we should be attracted to that. You know what I'm saying? In other words, I think we have to be intentional in making that crossover there.
Great. Yeah. Thank God we have a man of God, and we have men of God over us, and you can glean from that, you can learn from them. And thank God for that. Amen. Like Wally says, it has to be an intentional thing. You have to want it. You have to want to learn and receive, and if you have that spirit, I guarantee you that you'll be in situations where you'll be absorbing things from other men. Okay, brother.
What stood out was what you said, relationship and friendship with men in the church, and especially the relationship with Christ, because it says even human beings are made by God and are made to live in relationship with God. It is the only way we will ever be whole or fulfilled or empowered or effective. And that's something in the beginning when I gave my life to Christ, I struggled with having relationships with men. I just wanted to come to church, I just wanted to hear the word of God, but it was hard for me to open up, to build a trust back to certain people, so I just aligned myself with them. You know what, I think I can trust this person, or I think I can open myself up with this person. It took me several years to actually find good men that I was able to say, you know what, I can go to you. Because there was another thing where he mentioned, he asked several men, who is a man that you can go to when you struggle with something? And the book said that a lot of men hesitated to answer. He says, I don't want to know how many friends you have. Name me a man that you could go to immediately when you're going through something. And several men hesitated. And it spoke to me, and I said, who would you run to? As soon as you would go through something, a situation, something you're fighting, mental, whatever, who is that man you would definitely run to? And that's why I think it is important to build great relationships and friendships, not only with Christ, but with men of God.
Yeah, I think that's a two-edged sword right there, because it's on the one hand, you having a friend like that you can depend on, and the other side is you being that man. You being a man that someone can come to, and you will be able to give spiritual advice. You will have a spiritual influence that will help that person along for God. So, very good. Adrian.
I was having a conversation with a man in Bolivia one time, and I asked him, what his profession was, etc. He's a professional man, raised kids, right? you know, what about the will of God? He said, well, I think I've accomplished more than I put my kids through college, etc. And Bolivia's like that. They strive to, which is good. But, I'm asking him, what about the will of God? And I thought about David as he's about to die, and he instructs his son Solomon, and if you do this, you will not lack a man on the throne in Israel. And the Bible says that David eventually died, and that Solomon sat on the throne. But it wasn't, he wasn't instructing him to, but do the will of God, and in that. And that's the charge. That's what we do. That's our fellowship. That's what we should be putting into men. So I just thought about that.
Yeah, very good. I mean, we're not just trying to create good men. We're all for school and for bettering yourself and for studies and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, man, it really doesn't come down to, are you going to be saved? Are your kids going to be saved? Are they going to go to heaven? Are they going to fulfill the will of God? Are they going to do what God has called them to do? That's the highest measure. Beyond anything else is that level of manhood. Okay? So, okay, one more and then we'll stop.
Pastor, I just want to encourage coming to these serious men classes is good, but like the book says, we have to do something. You can't just come here and get entertained and we have to maintain that what you are saying has to become part of us so that we can do the will of God. It would be a sad thing if we come here and we try to replicate these things in our lives and then a test comes, because that's life. God puts us in situations where you have to make decisions, and these things that we're hearing, they have to become part of us. The book is very clear in saying, you haven't done these things, but as you do them, then you become what these things are in you. It would be sad if we just hear about it and we're waiting for somebody to take us by the hand and tell us exactly what to do, but we need to do these things. We need to have faith that doing these things, we're going to become the men that God, called us to be.
The Bible says that we'll be like a person that looks at his natural face in the mirror and then walks away and forgets. And you can forget as soon as you walk out of here.
Then another thing is, if you fail, or if you walk away and you say, the heck with this. But it's the persistence of going right back at it, and in your doing, God helps you accomplish or reach these things, to place them in your heart. Don't give up. Many times you will fail, and like you said, you get discouraged, people correct you, and you feel like they're stepping on you, or they're humiliating you, or they're bruising your ego. Like the book says, be a man, take it, and then try again until you finally, God opens your eyes through this consistency of wanting to be like Him.
And one of the chapters in the book, really, I thought it was very good, was the chapter where he talks about Jabez, and he had to overcome all these, these curses that were placed upon his life by his mother, actually, and he had to break that and rise up and say, that's not what I want. I want this. I've been handed this, but that's not what I see for my life. I want this, and he stretched out for it. He asked that God help him, and so, every one of you and me, we have to determine in our hearts how much do we want this, and begin to put it in action, begin to actually do these things. And if you'll do that, I'm sure out of this group, there'll be some powerful men. Somehow, someday we'll be thriving in some ministry, man. So encourage you. And like Brother says, it's not just words. Put these things into action. That'll help you. So, okay, that's what we have. Let's all stand in this place. Let's worship God, and as we subside, Brother Joshua will close